Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of you are safe. We are happy and delighted to host and welcome you to the second session of the online FDP. At this outset, I deem it my privilege to extend a warm welcome to our resource person, Dr. Rajalakshmi Chauhan. A warm welcome to you, ma'am. Before we start, some house rules to be followed. Your mics are muted by default. Please use chat box for any queries or questions to the speaker. You can pose the questions during the session and will be answered during Q&A session. The slides by the speaker will be made available to the participants based on speaker's discretion. The recording of the webinar will be available on SJC YouTube channel in a week's time. The webinar is purely on gaining knowledge and for self-improvement. Feedback link will be mailed to the participants at the end of Q&A session. Please fill and submit. E-certificates will be issued to the participants who attend all the sessions and submits the feedback form. Now, I invite Dr. Igneshwaran, Associate Professor, Department of Civil Engineering, SJEC, to introduce the speaker to the gathering. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you all. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker for the session, who is going to talk to us about writing a research proposal. Dr. Rajalakshmi Chauhan is an assistant professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering in IIT Jodhpur. She received her PhD in 2015 from IIT Kharagpur, and her research interests include image processing, image quality assessment, noise-aided image enhancement, and applications. She received the Research Grant 2017-20 under the Early Career Research Award from SERB DST Government of India for her research on noise-aided at preserving denoising. Dr. Chauhan regularly conducts workshop series on communication skills for students at IIT Jodhpur, and that includes sessions on technical writing, formal writing, presenting skills, and document processing. Dr. Chauhan received the ISTE LNT National Award for Best MTech Thesis in Electrical and Electronics Engineering, awarded by Indian Society of Technical Education, New Delhi, India, in the year 2012. In the year 2014, Dr. Chauhan received IEEE Region 10 Asia Pacific Women in Engineering Student Volunteer Award. In the year 2015, Dr. Chauhan received Premium Award for Best Paper in IET Image Processing, awarded by the Institute of Engineering and Technology, UK. Dr. Chauhan received the Teaching Excellence Award 2019 at IIT Jodhpur and the 2019 late Sri Prahlad P. Chabria Award for Best Woman Professional by HFRC, IEEE, India Council and WIE Pune section. Madam has also published 4 papers in national conference, 14 papers in international conference, and 8 papers in international journals. With this brief introduction, I present before you Dr. Rajalakshmi Chauhan. Now I will invite Dr. Rajalakshmi Chauhan to take over session. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Igneshwaran, for such a warm welcome. Also, thank you to Dr. Jyoti Damodaran and Madam Sandhya Das and everyone from SJC for having me here today. Thank you so much. So my name is Rajalakshmi, and in today's session, making a research proposal. I'm sharing my screen right now. Please just give me a quick confirmation if you're able to see the screen.
Yes, ma'am, we can see the screen.
Okay. So in today's session, I'll be talking about elements of a research proposal, means what are the basic components of writing a research proposal. I'll also talk about how, what are the contents of the budget of such a proposal, some important things that one needs to keep in mind, just in case, you know, if everything is going smooth, but some subtle things that we all need to keep in mind, so that, you know, the entire process of submitting the proposal, doing the research, getting meaningful outputs, that goes smoothly. So there are some lessons, or you can call them mistakes, that one should avoid doing, that I'll be talking about. And in the end, I'll talk about particularly technical writing and certain aspects of writing which can give your proposal an upper hand. So there are some common errors that we all make often, and if we can avoid those common errors, that would give our proposal an upper hand. So to start with, let us see what is the meaning of a research proposal. So research proposal, it's a document proposing a research project, generally in sciences or academia, it can be anywhere, and generally constitutes a request for sponsorship of that request. So in a sense, you are proposing to solve a question. You identify a question, you propose to solve a question, and essentially you are asking support, and by support we mean financial support for solving that question, right? So you're claiming that you can solve that question, and for this you will require these items. You'll need, these are your requirements, and you're looking for budget. You're looking for some support, financial support for that project. So what are the elements that a research proposal should satisfy? The idea should be that it proposes a research project that will result in a significant contribution to knowledge. That means it should not be a very incremental work. It should not be something like this. This is the current state, and we want to, just change it a little bit and make it slightly different. So there needs to be a significant contribution. There needs to be a significant dent in that, knowledge base. The second thing is that it should also contain a detailed plan of the project. It should include, that plan should include the methodological approach that you will be using and some sort of framework. Of course, the problem has not been solved yet, but you're expected to have some sort of, some idea about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. You also need to ensure that the proposed research is achievable within a given time and within available resources. That means, what is the time frame you're looking for? What are the resources you're looking for solving this question? That also needs to be clearly defined in your proposal. Another thing is, because you're claiming to be able to solve a particular problem, that means the person who's submitting the proposal, right? He or she is also expected to have demonstrated adequate expertise in solving or in working in related areas. So often while submitting a research proposal, you would be asked to submit your own biodata. Along with that, you would also often be expected to, list down your publications or your research experience in that area. So it doesn't have to be exactly in the area of problem statement, but in the larger area. So for example, if I'm aiming to solve a question of image denoising, I need to have some background in image processing, an established background in image processing. So the components of a research proposal, and right now in this session, the components that I'm talking about and that I'll be referring to, they are all from the funding agency, that is from Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. They have a board called Science and Engineering Research Board, which we call SERB, right? So SERB announces various funding opportunities. So there are various grant schemes, right? So Early Career Research Award is one such scheme which is given to new faculty members. By new, we mean who are in the first 3 to 5 years of their career. So the components that I'm talking about in this session are actually from the project template that Early Career Research Award requires for submission. So the first component, and this is very important, which is the origin of the proposal. What is the scientific rationale behind the proposed work? So what is the background? What is the background of the question you're trying to solve? You have to give some sort of introduction, make a backstory. What kind of problem you are trying to solve? Why does it need solving? So a background, why, and the motivation. What is motivating you to pick up this problem or this research area, this research question that you're trying to solve? The next section, which is again very important, is the review of the status of research and development. This essentially means literature review or whatever has happened in this area, in the problem that you are basically defining, both internationally and nationally. So around the world, scientists and researchers who have been working in the same area, what work have they done, where have they reached, right? So a very detailed critical review of literature is expected in this section. So suppose, for example, if I'm writing a proposal on, say, quality assessment, image quality assessment, that means I would need to clearly identify in 2 sections. One, which is the international state of the art. So at least in the past 10 years, or say 5 to 10 years, what work has been done in image quality assessment? What is the state of the art? By state of the art, we mean what is the best possible benchmark right now? What is the latest updated best performing algorithm as of now? So state of the art as well as a critical review is required. And why this section is very important is because this kind of sets the field, sets the, it lays the groundwork for you to establish that this has been done. And this is the gap in the current work. That means, say some algorithm solves problem A, B, and C, but it does not address these kind of problems, or does not address this kind of data, or this is where it fails, or this is the limitation. So this is where you identify the gap. Okay. And this is very important because that also projects, gives you an opportunity to project what you are going to do and what is going to be the novelty in your work. Okay. So the importance of the proposed project in the context of current status, based on what has been done, where the current technology is lacking, what you propose to solve, that is very important, because this is where the core contribution of your proposal has to be highlighted. It has to be projected, the novelty, because funding will be given to something which is novel. So it's a novel problem that you're trying to solve, or a novel approach, or a better approach to solve a problem. So this is very important to establish the contribution that your project is going to bring to this whole arena. Here again, if location is an aspect in your proposal, this is where you write about the location. In most projects, suppose it's a simple technology-based project where the technology is independent of the area that you're talking about. So this section does not need to be highlighted. But for example, if it's, say, if you're proposing a technology, or for example, it's a civil engineering project, for instance, where the terrain and the region and the overall geography is very important, then why you are selecting the particular geography, why you're selecting a location, that those bases have to be explained. Next, this is again this is a very crucial part of your project, because this outlines what is your work plan. So in this section, clearly you need to identify the scope of your project. By scope, we mean, so for example, one particular algorithm cannot solve all the problems of the world, right? For example, one image enhancement algorithm cannot enhance all kinds of images in the world. So when we talk of, since I work in image processing, I'm giving you an example from that. So there are different types of images. There could be medical images, there could be satellite images, there could be infrared images, there could be real world images that we capture with our cameras. So there are different types of images, right? Multi-resolutional images. So it's very important that the proposal should not, try to address everything and anything. It's very important to identify the scope. That means, for example, if I'm working on a project, if I'm writing a proposal, it's important that I outline clearly, right in this section, that this is the scope, meaning these are the types of images that we'll be dealing with. This is the type of degradation or this type of assessment that I'm dealing with. So what that would help us achieve is that whatever are the objectives that we define, we'll be able to clearly correlate them with the scope. Okay? So the scope as well as objective have to be very clearly defined as objective 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or n, till n. Okay. So objectives need to be very clearly defined here. Why this is important is because if your proposal is accepted, right, and when it is sanctioned, for example, that time you will have a list of approved objectives. So every time you submit a project report, or if you go for a review meeting, right? So it is in terms of those objectives that you define, you will be judged or you'll be asked questions about. So, okay, objective A was met, objective B has been met, objective C, we were not able to meet just yet, we're still working on that. So defining those objectives clearly is very important from the beginning. Next is the methodology. So what methodology should contain is details of how each of the objectives will be achieved, detailed and clear plans. So like I said in the beginning, you will not know exactly what is the solution of this problem you're proposing, right? Because that is the fun in doing research. You don't know what is going to happen, right? But you need, when you're giving a proposal, you need to have a very clear idea, or at least significantly clear idea, that this is the problem, and to reach this problem, based on what I know as of now, this and that, these approaches should be applicable, right? And to investigate that more is what you are asking the funding for, correct? So how you are going to achieve all the objectives that you just mentioned before, details, that has to be mentioned. Then your plan should be clear. This is the section where you write, you propose block diagrams, and you say, this could be the first stage, and then there is this stage where we propose to do so and so. We are expecting that at this stage we will get this kind of a result. Then we will do this with that result. So that expectation, that anticipation has to be very clearly very methodically explained in this section. So that's why this should contain block diagrams, as many tables, figures, equations, schematics, everything. And this is also where you put your preliminary results to establish that, we have done preliminary experiments on this kind of image that gives us that has given us promising results, and that is what is motivating us to believe that if we expand this approach to solve this problem, it should work and help us solve this question. So this is where preliminary results play a very important role, because they kind of validate what you are saying and what you're proposing to do. Preliminary results sort of, do a preliminary validation that, yeah, this can be done, or probably this will work. So this gives reviewers a little bit of confidence. Then an explanation and justification as to why your project plan should work, and a list of tasks. So like in objectives, you should also define a list of tasks that you need to address each of these objectives. That also should be a part of methodology. Time schedule, like I said in the beginning, that your proposal should have a well-defined time frame, which should be fixed, where you propose, because you cannot have infinite time to solve a question. Even if we would want to have a lot of time, funding agencies are always time bound. So time schedule has to be mentioned. Often time plans are given in terms of Gantt charts. They are bar charts. So this is an example. So on the first column that you see, these are the task names. So for example, you define tasks as planning, research, design. These are very broad, example tasks that I've mentioned. Your proposals would have very well-defined tasks which are related to your area. And then on the rest of the columns are basically time months or years, right? So suppose if I'm writing a proposal for 3 years, then I would have, say, 36 columns, one for each month. And by coloring or shading the months that I would require for each task, in this way, we can define very clearly that planning is expected to take 3 months from January to March. Research will start along with planning the second month, say from February to March. So like this, this kind of a time visualization is called Gantt chart, and this often helps a lot. It helps the PI, the principal investigator, actually to plan and execute. This is more for us than for the reviewer. Okay. Then research deliverables and impact. This is very important, because when somebody is funding your project, they want to know what is going to be the outcome. Often it is expected, if you have a tangible prototype of a technology at the end, that would be really, really great. Okay, having a tangible prototype. But even if the output is not a tangible prototype, the deliverable needs to be very clearly defined. So is it going to be a technology? Is it going to be an algorithm? Is it going to be an app? Is it going to be a product? Is it going to be a service? So the deliverable of the project, the actual output which you will deliver, that needs to be very clearly defined. Also a plan of how such deliverables can be used in society. Right? What is going to be the significance of what you're producing? What is going to be the impact of your work on society? How does this your work, what you're proposing to do, how solving that question makes people's lives better? How does it help society and the world? That impact, that significance also needs to be highlighted very clearly. Okay? Because that again is an added selling point for your project, because it establishes that it establishes how important it is for people to fund this kind of a project. Then again, if you're working in, if you're producing, your work involves anything that impacts the environment, and if there are any risks involved, that risk assessment and impact assessment also has to be included at this point. Normally for like simple technology simulation-based projects, this is not really necessary. Next, like I said before, establishing the expertise of the person who's claiming that they'll solve the question, the research question. Right? So the person who writes the proposal and takes the sole responsibility and is the point of contact and the person responsible for a project, that person is called the principal investigator, which is the PI. Right? There can be one PI, and it can also be a collaborative work. So there are co-PIs. So here is where the expertise of the PI has to be established. So expertise available with the investigators that will help them execute the project. So this includes what kind of publications you have before, what kind of patents you've filed, if you have published any preliminary results of the work that you're claiming to solve. Then a summary of responsibilities, because the moment you have multiple PIs, it's also important. You've identified objectives and you defined tasks very clearly. But then who is going to do what? That needs to be defined at this point, because if certain investigators do not have enough role and responsibility, they do not have to be a co-PI of the project. So it is not recommended to have a co-PI that has no responsibility, right? So this is where the summary of roles and responsibilities of each co-PI has to be clearly defined. Also, if I'm talking about early career research award, for such schemes, usually co-PI is not allowed. Early career research award, in the template it says that only there should be one PI, that's it. Then it should contain, your proposal should contain a proper complete list of references and other resources. So you will follow any standard form, standard style of referencing, have all the list of references and resources that you've referred to. And in the text, like we do in papers, do an in-text citation of each of those references. At this point, it would also be important, because now we've established the problem that we are trying to solve. We've also written how we are going to solve that problem, some rough plan that we have, right? Now it comes to what we need, right? So before asking for what we need to say what we already have. So this is available infrastructural facility. So facilities which are extended by the parent institution, that means your institution, what you say you need for this project, how much of it is already available by the parent institution, and what are the current infrastructural facilities that your institute has. So for example, so I'll come to equipment a little later, but for example, there may be a checklist that says, is electricity available? Is office staff available, right? Is a backup generator available? What kind of infrastructure are you currently operating on? This is important because when somebody funds a certain equipment, how that equipment will be managed, that is also has to be taken care of, right? From the beginning itself. So this is where we need to explain. There would be a checklist typically where you have to write yes, no, is this there, is this there? Yes, it's a yes, no kind of a checklist. Then from the equipment that you're asking is already available with you, with your parent institution, that also has to be said. So this was broadly about the components of a proposal, writing about the problem, writing about the question you are trying to solve, how you will solve it, and establishing your capability in solving this question. Next is the most important part of a proposal, because this is where we establish asking for money, right? So which is the budget. And while preparation of a budget, there are certain things that you need to keep in mind. So funding support is given in terms of, so it depends on a lot of factors. So in the beginning, while you're submitting the proposal, the PI needs to have some eligibility. So each scheme is going to clearly mention in the first, like in the introduction of the scheme itself, they will mention what is the eligibility of the PI. So you need to have that minimum eligibility criteria to be able to submit or for consideration. Then you need to also define what is the duration of your proposal that you're making. So the money is proportional to that, right? And how much of money you're asking for. So typically support is provided for these elements: equipment, manpower, consumables, travel, contingency, and in addition to that, element called overhead, which actually goes to your institute. It's a small percent, maybe 10% or 5%, or there's a, whichever is larger, there's an amount which is defined for each scheme, depending on different funding agencies. So apart from that overhead, these are the main components which you have to define that you need for solving the question you're claiming to solve. So equipment actually covers computational facilities and all the non-recurring purchase. So if I'm working in image processing, what is the computational facility that I need? I would need workstations. I would need software to simulate. And what is my data? My data is image, right? So if I'm using real world images, then I need a camera to purchase, to capture those images. So this is if I'm doing studies of illumination and something, so I need a light meter to measure illumination. So all the devices that you need to make measurements and to compute and to report, those all computational facilities, these are one-time purchases, so they come under non-recurring, and this is what comes under equipment. Next is manpower. So in manpower, you could hire a junior research fellow, you could hire a senior research fellow, you could take a PhD student in your project, you could also take a postdoc fellow in your project. So depending on, so this decision, you can always make a proposal that I want to take so-and-so, like maybe 1 GRF, 2 GRFs, and it's the funding agency that eventually like sanctions whether you'll get it or not. It's also important at this point to also define, like when you're saying, I need this much equipment, so how you're going to utilize that equipment. So if I'm asking for two workstations, for example, who's going to parallelly work on those 2 workstations? So that means that much manpower is also needed. So this kind of calculation would need to be done. Then there is consumables. Consumables primarily are like stationary item, storage devices. Travel would involve, say you write from this proposal, you publish a paper, you write a manuscript that is accepted in a conference. So the travel of the PI as well as students or staff members associated with the project, they can use this travel amount. This also has an upper cap. In most of the schemes, you cannot take more than that. Then contingency is miscellaneous. So you can keep some little amount in contingency in case, like it's a backup amount. If something goes wrong or you run out of funding in other of these heads, you can always transfer from contingency. And so it's a backup, it's miscellaneous. It's again a very small amount. So during the proposal submission, there are certain things that you need to submit regarding the budget. So you have to establish what is the requirement. Like I gave you an example that I need, for example, I need a workstation, I need a PC, I need a camera, I need software. Suppose these are my 4 requirements. So I need to clearly write why they are needed, what I'm going to do with them. Then that's a requirement. Then what is the model and the make of the equipment that I'm asking for? What is the quantity, like how many licenses am I asking for? How many workstations am I asking for? Then an estimate cost. Okay, this doesn't have to be an actual cost on that date. Usually, like in early career research award, they don't ask for quotation right away. It's optional while submitting proposal, but an estimate cost is needed. Also, a year-wise requirement is needed. So for example, for each of those heads, say manpower, right? We need to do this calc. So you need to make an Excel sheet and understand that, okay, if, for example, if the stipend or if the fellowship that I want to give the GRF is 25,000 plus HRA for 12 months, this is the amount for first year. Then second year, we'll give this much. Third year, maybe we will enhance the fellowship and we'll give this much. So that kind of requirement per year for each of these heads, equipment, consumables, travel, manpower, contingency, should also be mentioned. Now, what is the process? So how the whole thing will go about? So you will have an idea that you want to solve. You will have a question in mind, research question in mind. You'll identify one of the schemes, one of the call for proposals. Then you'll write a proposal, you'll submit it. Then a peer, expert review team is going to review this. Then they will, you will receive review requests, review results, sorry. After the review results are announced, you'll basically come to know that your project is accepted or being considered, or it's not being considered. Okay. And at that point, they will ask you to submit the quotations. If it's accepted, they will ask you to submit the quotations for the budget that you have proposed and some other documents like some undertaking from the institute, from your institute that says that, yes, you're a regular faculty member there. And suppose it's a MeitY project, like Ministry of IT. There's also this clause like, for example, if you move from the institute, then who will continue the project? What is the, what is the deal? What exactly is the scenario at that institute? Those kind of documents, there are standard templates for that. Those documents will need to be submitted. After you've submitted that, a couple of months later, you will be released a sanction letter. That sanction letter is actually stating the complete details, your approved, all the details about your project, the duration, and the amount which is sanctioned. So based on the quotations that you submit, then you receive a sanctioned amount, right? That is what the sanction letter contains. And the day your first installment is released. So when I'm talking about those other documents, right, in the beginning, in the previous section, submit quotations along with that. So there also you will need to submit RTGS details. For example, when the fund has to be released, what account does that fund need to be transferred to? So all those details. So when the first installment is released, your R&D office is going to inform you that such an installment has been received. And the day that is done, that is the first day of your project. Okay, that day your project has already started. So if the project is for 3 years, that day is the first day of your project. Next very important step is to complete the purchase, especially of the non-recurring, the equipment part. So it may happen that equipment related installment may come first, so that you can complete the equipment purchase as soon as possible. Here, it's very important to follow the general financial rules 2017, and they have been modified a little later on. So, all this information, the stores and purchase department of your institute will be able to help you with this. If you want to purchase X item, if its cost is this much, then what is the process? When do you need to form a local purchase committee? When do you need to, announce a tender or a bid? So all these things your stores and purchase office should be able to tell you. There is also a government e-marketplace, which is like an online, it's an online Amazon for all the government agencies from where we can purchase equipment. So it is monitored by the government, which is called GEM, Government e-marketplace. So this, the GFR, the General Financial Rules, also very clearly outline what are the regulations and rules that need to be followed if you're purchasing from GEM or you're purchasing from any other vendor. So purchase is a very important aspect. And then every year at the end of your project, you will need to submit an annual utilization certificate, which will also come from your accounts office. Maybe a CA does the auditing. So a utilization certificate and a statement of expenditure along with the progress report. Okay, so these three things have to be submitted every year. And in addition to this, you may be also called for a review meeting, a progress review meeting. It may or may not happen. But you need to be prepared at the end of every year that a progress meeting may be called, where you will be asked to go and present what you have done or how much of the fund you've utilized, how you've utilized them. If you underutilize them, why did that happen? What is the reason? And it's very important to complete this process in time, because it very significantly impacts the release of next installment. So if there's a mistake in UC or statement of expenditure, then the release unnecessarily would get delayed. So this is where you need to be very careful and stick to the timeline. So then this is not including the closure right now, because this is how it will go every year. At the end of your last year, there you will have to submit a closure report and some other documents, showcase how much did you publish, what results came out, right? There again, there will be a review meeting. And at the end of it, you will receive a grade on your project. At the end of your project, you will receive a grade. And say it's a government agency, then that grade remains in your report card for future. Like how you perform in your previous project, when you submit your next proposal to the same agency, that report card is going to be there, right? How you performed in the previous project. Now, this brings me to the next aspect of bottlenecks. Like everything is, you've submitted the proposal, you got the funding, everything is going great, but there are still mistakes that you can do that can unnecessarily delay, create delays. So often these things are not always written very explicitly in every place, but this is where if you speak to someone who has submitted or gone through a project in your institute, they would be able to help you advise, right? So one is the process of purchase, because as a new faculty member, we often do not know financial rules, right? We don't know the purchase rules. So I would advise everyone to download GFR 2017 as a PDF, go through them in details, okay, for your own reference, and then your office, stores and purchase office can advise you. Also maintain a stock register. Your institute will of course maintain a stock register for all the like the equipment that you purchase, but for consumables and everything, you yourself should maintain a stock register. Then recruitment of manpower. So this is where like I'm sharing what it's a mistake that I did. So when I got my first installment for my sub project, it was completely equipment, right? So immediately the non-recurring, the manpower installment had not come yet, and my project has started because the first installment has been released. So those first few months, like first 2-3 months until the next installment for manpower actually came, I did not recruit a JRF because I thought that I don't have the funds for it, correct? But every institute has this, there's a way out of it where you can take advance, hire a JRF, and then when the funding will come, that can get adjusted. So I did not know that, right? So I unnecessarily wasted first 2-3 months of my project not hiring a JRF because I was occupied with the equipment. So this is not written anywhere. So this is where you need to bring in and get to know from your office staff. Then, like I said, utilization certificate and statement of expenditure are very crucial for the release of installments. If you make a mistake, if there's a tiny error in calculation or date, that UC will not be considered, then you'll have to get another UC issued. Then again, there's a lot of offices involved in this, right? So it may take a little time. So this is where you need to be very careful. The PI should clearly, carefully, thoroughly review all UCs and statement of expenditures before submitting it, because the next installment's release depends on it. Okay. Then this thing about requests and deadlines. So there is a very, very well designed online portal. Most of the funding agencies that you will apply for, I'm talking about SERB, which is DST. There's a very well defined portal which is SERB online. I'll show you at the end of this talk. So there is option you can upload everything, you'll submit your proposal online, you'll get all notifications, requests, everything is through that portal, right? There's also option of submitting requests and there are deadlines for each of those requests, but oftentimes the deadlines may not be explicitly mentioned in some FAQ. Right? So for example, you want to apply for extension. So you have completed your project and you want to apply for extension of say 6 months. You don't want any other, you don't want more funding, but you just want 6 more months because some objective has not yet been achieved, for instance. So to apply for that extension, you need to apply at least 5 months in advance. But this fact that you have to apply at least 5 months in advance, this may not be written explicitly somewhere, right? So these things you need to, like you have to take an initiative to go in and find out. For example, your project is over. After a certain duration, after your project is over, the portal may not allow you to submit an extension request. So what is that amount? Again, that may not be written clearly somewhere. So this is where you need to be inquisitive and you need to find out. Another thing is in every publication that you produce with the help of this support, you must always acknowledge that grant in your paper. Okay? Because when you submit a progress report, right, that question may be there that was this publication, was the grant acknowledged in this publication? So it should not happen at that time that you realize that, oh, that paper I submitted last year, but I forgot to add that as an acknowledgement. It should not happen at the end of the year when you're submitting the progress report. So what I would suggest would be that a template of how a progress review has to be submitted, report every year has to be submitted. That also should be very clear to you when you start the project. Do not wait for the first year to end and then you come to know that, okay, utilization certificate is needed and project report is needed and all these. Okay, so these are some aspects that someone who's submitting a proposal or working on a project for the first time, if you keep these in mind, then the overall process will go on very, very smoothly. So this was about the proposal. And the next thing, how much time do I have? I have about 45 more minutes left, right? So this is where I would like to talk about another aspect, which is very, very important about the overall appearance or the overall message and the expression of your proposal, and that is the aspect of technical writing. Okay, so before I go into this, let me quickly show you the other portal, which is actually the SERB portal. Please give me a quick confirmation if you're able to see the Chrome screen, the SERB website.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is one of the agencies where we talk about funding opportunities, right? So serbonline.in, serbonline.in. This is the official page of DST, which is, and its research board, which is Science and Engineering Research Board. So for different areas of science and engineering, SERB has different schemes and announcements. So irrespective of which area you're from, so suppose we are from engineering, like I'm from engineering, there's somebody from engineering and sciences, there is one stream called engineering sciences. So under that engineering sciences, you would have electrical engineering, civil engineering, and different other types of engineering, right? So engineering sciences would be the area in which engineering and science field projects would be submitted. So here you see on the top, funding opportunities and announcements, right? So if you go to funding opportunities, there is a list of schemes and programs that they have. So if you're interested, please just click on these, just go to serbonline.in, click and read the points that you might find interesting. And on the right, we have awards and fellowships. So there's a PDF postdoctoral fellowship, Ramanujan fellowship. So in each of these fellowships, there are certain eligibilities that you need to carefully go through. One is this Teachers Association for Research Excellence called TARE. I'll just open this quickly and show you. So this scheme aims to facilitate mobility of faculty members working in regular capacity in state universities or colleges and in private academic institutions to carry out research in an established publicly funded institution like IITs, ISC, or ISERs, right? So you need to identify a mentor, and there are certain other conditions, there are eligibilities. So all these things you may go through. This has closed. The applications are closed for this year, but this may be useful in the next year, right? So like this, there are many other. There's a SERB Women in Excellence Award. some other fellowships and opportunities are there. So please, when you have time, go through these in details. And there's also this option of announcements where you can actually see which announcements and proposals are closed, what are open right now. So like if I click on ongoing, this is the scheme which is currently open. These are open around the year, right? And what are upcoming? Right now, there's no upcoming scheme, but this way you can keep a track on, you can keep a track on how, on your own timeline, like if this is the deadline, then I should, at least start writing a proposal right now. So you may please check this, and there are a lot of funding opportunities that you could find here. This is one of the most popular and generous funding agency. It's from the government of India. There are a few other agencies like CSIR, and especially when you have collaboration with some industry, there are more agencies, there are more schemes that you can explore. So this was one that I wanted to share with you right now. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. The link that I'm talking about is serbonline.in. So at this point, regarding proposals, if there are any questions, I would be happy to take them. And then we'll continue with some mistakes that we can avoid in writing, in the expression and language of the proposal, that may give our proposal an upper hand. So maybe at this point, I can take a few questions, if that's okay with the organizers.
Okay, ma'am. We have two questions from the same. I will read out, ma'am.
Yes.
First question is, he has mentioned here, I have been a recipient of DST or SERB Young Scientist Award in 2013. Over the years, I have observed that DST SERB prefers to find multi-institutional projects. Of course, it also prefers multidisciplinary projects, which makes sense in this time and age. However, what is your take on the multi-institutional funding preference aspect of funding, since you have received ECR recently?
So that's a very good question. So I got ECR in 2017. It was a 3-year ECR, by the way, is now what used to be Young Scientist Award, that is now known as Early Career Research Awards. So I got ECR in 2017, and my proposal was not multi-institutional because in ECR, oftentimes because it's clearly written that there can be one PI. So then in that case, if you have multiple co-PIs from multiple institutions, because the moment you have another institution involved, if there is a co-PI from there, I don't know whether it would be applicable or not, because it says that there needs to be one PI. But of course, in view of the multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary nature of research today, right? Because to solve any problem, the approach has to be interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary for that matter. So I understand that over the years, the preference has moved to multi-institutional preferences. That is primarily for many other schemes like high risk, high reward kind of schemes, or extramural grants. That's another scheme of DST. But for ECR, I'm not sure that the approach, the project should be multidisciplinary, but the need for a multi-institutional project, that right now I don't think is a primary criteria for ECR, because mine wasn't.
Shall we go to second question, ma'am?
Yes, please.
The second question is another question from my end. He has mentioned like that. I have also received the SRG from DST SERB in 2019. In my opinion, SERB is now averse to providing funds for softwares such as MATLAB, any virtual softwares, printers, etc., possibly indicating that these should be already available in the institute or lab. What is your opinion on the same? Did this happen to you in ECR?
So no, this did not happen to me in ECR, although now our institute also has a campus-wide license for MATLAB, and probably if it was there that time, I would not have asked for it, but I did ask for software, and toolboxes are not supported, but the baseline software is supported by SERB, right? But additional toolboxes may not be supported. So I'm not very clear about that, but this did not happen with me. But I don't know if anything has changed in the last 3 years.
Only 2 questions. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, okay. So I'll move on. I'll share my screen again. And this is where I want to talk about how we can make the language of our proposal attractive, right? Because all of us know how to write papers, all of us know how to format a paper, but many a times, because many of these agencies, the template that they offer is in Word, right? It's a Word template. And Word requires a lot of formatting, like especially when you're writing a technical proposal, which involves a lot of equations. Then correct formatting, which adhere to technical writing guidelines, that is very important. And if that is there, then the overall appearance of your proposal looks, it becomes very good, right? And this holds not just for proposal, but also for papers and any other article that you write, because everything that a researcher is writing is technical writing. A report is technical writing. An email that you write asking for, say, a postdoc fellowship, that has to follow technical writing guidelines. Papers and reports, all these need to follow certain guidelines. So the common errors that we often make unknowingly, those are something, if we correct them, then the overall expression, the appearance of the project changes a lot. So one very fundamental errors which I've seen many a times being made is in terms of grammar, but it's not very obvious. The error is not very obvious. So that is called a run-on sentence, right? So it occurs when 1 or 2 or more independent clauses, like they were supposed to be independent sentences, but say while speaking, we do not take a pause. We say them in a stretch, right? But while writing the same thing, it would be called a run-on sentence. So just for example, like I just said, while speaking, we may not say it, but while writing, we need to take care of it. The result of the study, an example, a result of the study were inconclusive. Therefore, more research needs to be done on the topic. This is written as a single sentence, but actually this has 2 independent clauses, right? The results of the study were inconclusive is one independent clause. Therefore, more research needs to be done is another independent clause. So these could as well have been 2 separate statements, but adding them with just a comma is incorrect grammar. So it should have been 2 sentences with a full stop saying, therefore, more research needs to be done on the topic, or another way was just to add a semicolon there. So these run-on sentences, we write them very frequently because it doesn't matter when we are speaking, but when we write them, it results in incorrect grammar. Right? So I'm not going to go into details, but I'm just going to kind of rush through these ideas. Starting a sentence with so or but, it's okay when you are speaking, right? But while writing in a paper or in a proposal, starting a sentence with so or but is not advisable. Here by but, we mean, it doesn't mean that it is, I'm not talking about a statement where but is actually needed in the beginning of the sentence. For example, but for XYZ to happen, or but for so-and-so to happen, this would not have happened, something like that. There it's okay. But when we are trying to explain but in the form of XYZ happened, but ABC did not happen, right? There you cannot break it into 2 sentences and start a sentence with but. That would be incorrect. Same holds for so. So for example, the denominator is complex, so it must be rationalized. While saying it, it's okay, but writing it in a paper or a proposal, this would be considered colloquial language. Right? So the denominator is complex, therefore it must be rationalized. Another error that we often make is misplaced or dangling modifiers. So this is a very interesting example. Like broken and dusty, the garage had an old computer that was found by Clarence. This is an example. Now, what is broken and dusty? Is it the garage? Is it the old computer, or is it Clarence that is broken and dusty, right? So we would have, what about this sentence? Broken and dusty, Clarence found an old computer in the garage. This sounds like Clarence is the one who's broken and dusty, but that is not what the author is trying to say. It's trying to say that the old computer is what is broken and dusty, right? So a better way to rephrase this sentence so that the meaning goes across is to say, in the garage, Clarence found an old computer that was broken and dusty. It's clear. There is no misplaced modifier. There is no confusion who or what is broken and dusty. So this is just another example. Like they found out that the walkways had collapsed on the late evening. So it's not clear that did they found out that walkways had collapsed onto the late evening news, or the fact that they found out while watching the late evening news that the walkways had collapsed. So just a way of rephrasing a sentence for it to make more sense. Then parallelism. This is again a very, very common error, because while we are speaking, we do not, it does not matter. But while writing, it's important that when you have two components of a statement, like you, for example, I'm just going to use dash here, okay? So dialysis is a process that includes dash and dash. So these two dashes, these are parallel components of a statement. So they need to be in the same form. So it cannot be that one is a noun and the other is a verb. Okay. So for example, in the statement that is given here, it says dialysis is a process that includes the removal of nitrogenous wastes and correcting electrolyte imbalances and fluid overloads. So this is not correct. Why? Because in the first part, there are two parallel components here, dash and dash. The first one is a noun. It's an abstract noun, removal. And the second one is a verb, correcting. So this is not correct. So it should have been removal and correction. You could have obviously said includes removing nitrogenous waste and correcting electrolytes. That was also fine. So just maintaining parallelism. Subject verb agreement. This usually students make these errors a lot. I haven't seen faculty members making these errors ever, but just that each of the steps is treated, not are, right? Pronoun agreement. This happens a lot when we are writing a proposal or a paragraph about our work. We exactly know what the pronoun is referring to because we've been involved with it for so long. But just look at this example that says lasers have also been used to study the reaction by which nitric oxide and ozone makes NO2 and molecular oxygen. It plays an important role in the chemistry of ozone layer and something. Now it's not clear, this pronoun it refers to what? Does it refer to lasers? Does it refer to reaction? Does it refer to nitric oxide or ozone or NO2 or oxygen? What is this it, right? The author knows that by it, the author is referring to the reaction, but it's not clear. So it's better to rephrase it. And instead of it, use this process, just for the sake of understanding of the reviewer. Okay. It's not grammatically incorrect, but the reviewer will not understand, or the message that you are trying to convey that may not come across that aggressively, clearly. Then missing articles often create a lot of confusion and can change the meaning. This is known to everybody. I'm just going to walk through this. Now the language, again, when a student is helping you write a proposal, they may often, you would not make this error, but students, young students while writing papers often make this error because for them everything is colloquial. Like even emails are like they're writing a text. So this is where they need to be advised. The language should always be formal. It should not be informal. You cannot use, you should not use contractions like don't and can't are a no-no. You use do not, cannot, right? Then the use of which versus that, where to use which, where to use that. For example, which is used when the clause which is following it does not contain essential information. It just contains an additional information. Okay, but you use the word that when the clause that is coming after the word that actually conveys very essential information. So there are two examples here which very clearly distinguish where to use which and where to use that. So an example is our office, which has 2 lunch rooms, is located in New York. This is the first sentence. What does this mean? The main information that the person is trying to convey here is that our office is in New York, right? And then there's just some additional information about that office. Our office, that office has 2 lunch rooms. Okay. So this is just additional information using the word which. But in the second sentence, it says our office that has 2 lunch rooms is located in New York. So if I was to say this in Hindi, it means our office, wo office जिसमें 2 lunch rooms हैं, वो वाला office, that particular. So the essential information that the person is trying to convey is that वो वाला office that has 2 lunch rooms, that is located in New York. Okay, so the meaning and the emphasis that you wanted to put on words changes completely when you use which and when you use that. So some examples and some use of will, way, may, would. So when we are writing something, especially in a proposal, I don't know, depending on the area that you work on, I would personally prefer to write this would happen than say this will happen, because when I say will, I'm making a statement that it is 100% going to happen, but I don't know whether it's going to happen or not, right? So would and may kind of balance that probability of not knowing whether it's going to happen or not. Then tense, usually one should avoid using continuous tense. Using present, past, or perfect is totally fine. Continuous should not happen. Like you should not write that current is increasing, then it is decreasing. It should be current increases, then decreases. Suppose you're referring to a graph and explaining what's happening in the graph. And redundant words, again, students do this a lot because they're trying to fill words. Like red in color, it's obvious that it's red in color, right? Don't have to say, it could just be written as red. Worst case, maximum possible error. It's just maximum error. Introduce a new. When you introduce it, obviously means that it's a new thing that you're talking about. So introduced a new concept is somewhat redundant, but it's still popularly used. Then voice and person, improper adjectives, possessive apostrophe, it is, it's, while using apostrophe. Then the choice of words, oftentimes the review committee, like I said, suppose you're submitting a proposal to engineering sciences, right? So it may not be that the person who is reviewing the proposal works exactly in that pinpointed area, right? So it's better to avoid jargon in your proposal. For example, just look at this sentence. For the first year, the links with SDPC and HAC were not connected, and all required OCS input data were artificially loaded. The Catch-22 and Mervyn were not. So a person who, say, does not directly work in that area may not have any idea what is SDPC, what is HAC, what is OCS. Too many buzzwords here. So a simple way to rewrite this would be, because some of the links in the computer systems were not connected, the first year we could not run the software. So the summary, the crux here is know your audience. Also, whenever you have an undefined, unfamiliar concept that you're introducing for the first time, better to write one line about it, write the full form, and then write its abbreviated form in brackets. And then everywhere in the rest of the document, you can use that abbreviated form. But in the first time, you should write it in full form, define the abbreviation there. And also, if it's a new concept, may not be very commonly known to everyone, write one sentence about it. Right? And this is again an example of misplaced danglers or modifiers, where by how we write a statement, we may avoid ambiguity. Because again, see, the purpose of a proposal is that your reviewer should be able to clearly understand what you're trying to say, what you're trying to do, and what impact it's going to have, right? So the more ambiguity you can eliminate from your proposal or your language, that's going to really help. So for example, in low water temperatures and high toxicity levels of oil, we tested how well the microorganisms survive. So it sounds like we were testing it in low waters and we were sitting in low water temperatures and high toxicity levels of oils and tested how they survive. No, but what we mean is how the microorganisms survive. Right? So the less ambiguous way of writing this would be, we tested how well the organisms survived in low water temperatures and high toxicity levels. Then spelling errors can obviously be corrected. Punctuations, some summary of, when you're writing summary or bulleted points, you should put a period only after a completed sentence, not after an incomplete phrase. Then comma, people in the research community are divided about Oxford comma, but I personally find it very useful. Now, what is Oxford comma? Just for example, if the sentence reads, we invited the rhinoceri, Washington and Lincoln. So what does this mean? That there was some party to which we invited the rhinoceri, the two rhinoceros, we invited Washington and we invited Lincoln, because there is a comma before and. So when you're listing something and there is a and, there is a comma before and that is what is called the Oxford comma, the one that is drawn in red here. But if we did not use this Oxford comma, we did not use this comma before and, the statement becomes something like this. We invited the rhinoceri, Washington and Lincoln. So it sounds like Washington and Lincoln were the names of the two rhinoceri that we invited. Okay, so the meaning completely changes and what you're trying to explain completely changes. This happens not only in creative writing, but in technical writing, I think Oxford comma can always be used without reservations. It will always help clarify the point that you're trying to make. Okay. Capitalization, so these things I'm just going to rush through, but M dash, so this is something I did not know before. I came to know about it only during my PhD in the course on English for technical writing, and that is the use of different types of dashes. Hyphen, I used to think hyphen is everything, but hyphen, N dash and M dash, there are three types of dashes. So hyphen is the one that you have on your keyboard, which is simply used to join two words and make them into one word, like time varying, frequency dependent, ebook, like this. Right? There's a slightly longer dash, which is called N dash, and that is used to denote range. So when we write a range of page numbers, ideally what we should be using is an N dash. Right? Like in any electrical circuit, if I say IV characteristics, current voltage characteristics is something I'm trying to plot. So their current and voltage are equal, right? There is nothing bigger and there is nothing smaller. So when I'm representing connection or conflict between two equal quantities like current and voltage, there we use an N dash, EN, slightly longer than a hyphen. And the third type, it's also used as a hyphen when the word you're trying to hyphenate is already hyphenated, right? Like a National Book Award winning ebook only website. So there you cannot use two hyphens. So there you would use an N dash instead of a hyphen. And the third one is called an M dash, which is the longest. And that is used in place of a comma and in place of parenthesis, meaning if we place some content, some statement or group of words between these two M dashes, okay, understand that this is M dash, it's a longer dash, longer than N dash. Even if you remove that part completely, the sentence would still make sense. So the thing that you would normally put between commas or you would put between parentheses, you can use an M dash just for this additional effect. Formatting of mathematical terms. Of course, if you were using LaTeX, then you don't have to worry about formatting of mathematical terms. But many of the funding agencies actually give a Word template, right, to submit the proposal. So if you're using LaTeX, it's a software which you use for document processing. Once you start using LaTeX, you probably would not want to work on Word, because LaTeX makes everything look very beautiful, very well formatted, because you're coding everything, right? But if you're using Word, formatting of mathematical variables is something we need to be careful about. Mathematical variables always need to be italicized. Okay, they should not appear as normal. They should always be italicized if they are mathematical variables. But we never italicize numbers, We never italicize mathematical operators like cos, sine, log, exponent, exp, exponent. Mathematical operator, those are mathematical functions which should not be italicized. Mathematical operators like plus, divide, minus, they should never be italicized. Okay, only the variables are italicized. Just some examples here. So iteration count, n. So n is the mathematical variable here. The ith element of array, y. That ith element is yi, right? So I is also a mathematical variable. Y, which is the array, that is also a mathematical variable. So I have put both of them in italics. But suppose I wanted to write maximum frequency, f max. So here f is a mathematical variable, it is italicized, fine. But max, the word max is actually not a variable, it is just an abbreviation, a shortcut to represent maximum, correct? So it's not mathematical, I don't need to italicize it. F is what should be italicized. So what is the error in this example? Y is equal to m into 5x plus c plus 20. You notice this has a lot of errors. 5 should not have been italicized. The arrow, this bracket should not have been italicized. These two plus should not have been italicized. 20 should not have been italicized. Right? So the one in red are marked as the errors. This is how the correct version should have been. So here log and cos, they should not be italicized. If you are using LaTeX, while you are using, so what happens in LaTeX is that if you want to represent any mathematical expression or relationship, you put that in between these two dollar symbols in LaTeX, right? In equation, this works very well, but if you're using it in text, like in continuation in a statement, I want to write that, the variable f represent quality or something, represent some factor. So I would suggest italicizing it in text rather than using dollar symbol. Unless you have to, like there's a superscript or subscript in your variable, then you have to use dollar symbol. There's no other option. But if you use italics in text, it would give the appearance a little more uniform. Okay, what I just said in the end is just for LaTeX that I'm talking about. So see how this is how it would look. If I used PQM in dollar, this is how it looks. There's some space is introduced between them, but just italicizing them gives PQM. So in text, just using italics would be better. In equation, using dollar symbol would be better. Spacing and formatting. This is again a very common error because a lot of people put too much spaces between special characters, which is not needed. Like space is needed before the opening bracket, and it is needed after the closing bracket. It is not needed after the opening bracket. Like the discrete wavelet transform DWT, the space is not needed before D. It is not needed after T. It is needed before the bracket and after the bracket. Space is, for example, you're using a colon. Space is needed after the colon, not before the colon. And space is needed after a comma, not before a comma. This is typically done by students. This is not like relevant for us, but these are some common mistakes that happen while writing when we do not proofread our data very carefully, and the overall appearance becomes a little strange. Then these are some other very simple guidelines, like don't start a sentence with a number, you spell it out, you write it in words. Also using correct SI unit. For example, for a lot of times we forget, we study it in college, but then we forget what exactly is this SI unit. Like for time, the SI unit is seconds. The symbol for seconds is S, not SEC, sec, right? So it happens. Then details have to be mentioned, like axes should be labeled. When we are writing specification, this is another interesting thing which I did not notice before. I noticed much later in life. That was how we represent certain specifications. For example, I want to say you're using a resistance of 10 ohms. This is fine, 10 ohms, right? But if I say a 10 ohm resistor, I'm using the word 10 ohm as an adjective. So there I need to hyphenate 10 ohm if I want to use it as an adjective. 10 battery sources of 3 volt each is fine, but 10 3-volt battery, 3 volt needs to be hyphenated. Always, and this is again super, super important, always check your article for plagiarism using a plagiarism detection software. You can use Turnitin if your institute has a license. You can use, there's a software called Urcund, URCUND, Urcund. There are many other plagiarism softwares. Even now, even Google Classroom is allowing similarity checks on submissions. It's very important that your article should be original. Your idea, especially while you're writing, see, it may happen that your idea is absolutely original, so your entire methodology and work plan, everything that is original, right? But when you're writing that literature survey wala part, your state of the art international and national status, that time it may happen that people start copy pasting, and the moment you copy paste an entire sentence, it's going to be detected as plagiarized. So this is where comes into picture paraphrasing. You want to explain what a paper particularly does. You are critically reviewing a paper, so do not take sentences directly from that paper. Write them in your own words as what you understand is happening in the paper. So that's it from my side. There's a huge difference from how a student is writing a paper and how a faculty member is writing a proposal. The aspects and ideas, priorities change a lot when a student is submitting an assignment or a paper, or a faculty member is writing a proposal. I hope you enjoy this process, and I hope you write proposals, and I'm sure it's going to be a learning experience. So have fun, and I'm here if you have any questions at this point. Thank you. My email ID is on the screen. If you have any questions, you please feel free to write to me. It's Rajalakshmi Chauhan at iitj.ac. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We are happy and fortunate today to hear the talk of Dr. Rajalakshmi Chauhan. You have truly inspired us with your expertise, and which is very essential. Thank you, madam. The forum is now open for questions.
Sure.
Ma'am, I have 2 more questions here. Hello, ma'am.
Yes, I'm here.
One is from participant. Ma'am, can I know the Gantt chart?
The Gantt chart.
Gantt chart.
Okay, I'll just go to that slide again. What exactly is the question about the Gantt chart? Like how it is made?
Only that much they've written, ma'am.
Okay, I'll go back to that.
Okay. Right. So a Gantt chart is basically you proposing your schedule. So what are the tasks that you have mentioned? Those tasks you write in the first column, and this horizontal axis, these columns are going to represent time. So let us consider you're writing a proposal for just 6 months, right? So have 6 columns, each column corresponding to a month. Like this is an example of just 6 months, right? So what this, by shading particular parts, by shading particular months, what we are saying is that the first instance, if you look at planning, the task of planning will take from January to March, 3 months. The task of research will start in February, and we are expecting that in 2 months, by March, it will be over, right? Then the task of design will start in March. It will take 2 months, and we'll cover that. Implementation will take 3 more months starting April, and all follow-up, documentation, all those things will take maybe last 2 months. So this is just a visual representation of what your plan of executing these tasks are, right? So it helps you keep a track on are we running late? Did we miss something, right? And it helps the reviewer understand how this is done. So this is how a Gantt chart would be. For a longer project, you will have more columns. It's essentially just a task versus time visualization. It's a chart. I hope that answers the question. Whether Gantt chart is add-on in MS Office or it's self-made table?
What we can do is, like, just to start with, you can make it as a table. Just make it as a table and highlight certain tables in a particular color. Like, it's a simple table. There are plugins also. Plugins are also there, but I've never used them. I've always used a simple table in MS Word or Excel. Just shade certain cells for a particular task, and then it represents the same thing. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, ma'am. One more question. Madam, my own paper is showing similarly during plagiarism check. How to overcome?
There is no way to overcome it. Self-plagiarism is real. So even if you have similarity with your own paper, you have to rewrite that part. If you're trying to publish in a different page, if you're trying to publish in a different avenue, right, you need to rewrite it. So self-plagiarism is not allowed.
Then one more question, ma'am. When we take money from agency, that time any financial agreement is required?
So like the undertaking that you are giving and your institute is giving, that is essentially the agreement. I'm not aware if a separate agreement is required, but it may, I don't know, like if for if other schemes are requiring any agreement, I'm not aware, but basically it's an undertaking that you're giving, right? That you will solve these questions for which you would need this much of amount. So this is where every year when there will be a progress review, right, they will ask that we release this much amount, how much of it has been utilized. A very important thing after money has been released is to utilize that money. Parked money, like you take the money and it's there in your institute's current account, that doesn't it's not advisable at all.
One more question, ma'am. Ma'am, you hit the nail on the head with the grammar aspect. In my opinion, this aspect starts with the exposure to good technical business writing courses and can then be enhanced with the experience and more writing. What is your take?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that, because many times we do not notice these things. Although we have, like, since childhood, we study from books which follow these guidelines. Usually in textbooks, you'll never find run-on sentences. You'll never find dangling modifiers. You'll not find mathematical variables, out of formatting. Why? Because before publishing, all this literature goes through a very rigorous editorial process. There's proofreading, right? So one way that researchers can get into this head first is universities introducing courses, especially for PG students, which are called English for Technical Writing. This is not English for communication. Okay, English for communication is taught separately, but English for technical writing actually deals with these aspects, which are important from a technical expression point of view. And if that's there, I think it helps a lot, because during my PhD, when I attended this kind of a course, then I realized that, okay, these are the mistakes that I was making, right? And it's very helpful if such courses are there.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. One more question. What are the funding opportunities for management studies?
Management studies. I am sorry, I don't have an idea about management studies. I don't know what funding will be there. But
it's okay, ma'am.
Just check, sir. You can check, sir, if there are. I don't know if there are other schemes, but I'm sorry that I'm not very confident.
It's okay, ma'am. One more question, ma'am. Other than SERB, what are other grants available to faculty members?
So there is CSIR. CSIR offers certain science-related funding. Then there is MEITY, MEITY, Ministry of Electronics and IT, MEITY, that also offers certain fundings. So if you can just check the government's website, most of the different departments of the government branches and ministries, they have some sort of research funding. Most of them, like MEITY and SERB, DST, these are and CSIR are what I'm familiar with.
Okay. MS Word or LaTeX, which one is better for journal paper writing?
LaTeX.
Okay, ma'am.
Especially, I don't want to say that MS Word is not good because we've grown up working on MS Word, right? But what happens with LaTeX is, especially when it comes to references, like citing list of references in a particular format, standard that the journal requires, interlinking and labeling of figures and images and references, formatting. For example, when you're writing a thesis, right? So if you're writing a thesis, your thesis would have like maybe 200, 300 references. While you were proofreading, you notice that, this reference does not fit here better, or say this figure does not fit here better. Let me move this figure later. So figure 1 is now figure 3, suppose. That means all the other figures need to be renumbered in Word, right? Moving one reference up and down, all the references would need to be renumbered. But the advantage with LaTeX is that it takes everything as a label, it's indexed. So it doesn't matter what you move here and there, it would automatically renumber. So that's where LaTeX is very, very useful for papers and thesis.
Okay, ma'am. One participant has written, please convey Rajalakshmi madam that it was a great way of pointing out the usual way of making mistakes in technical writing.
Thank you so much.
One more question, ma'am. Is there any separate tool to check grammar while using words?
So Word, using MS Word grammar tool is inbuilt, right? It will show you an error. It will give you option to rephrase it. Then you can also use Grammarly. Grammarly is another tool that can be used. It can be installed on phone as well as on laptop, and it can help. It gives you good suggestions to rewrite certain sentences.
Okay, ma'am. One more question, last question. Which agency is best for technical research?
So I cannot recommend an agency, but there are many. I have written a project for SERV, which is about to complete now, and my experience with SERV has been very good. So DST is the one that I would recommend right now.
Okay, ma'am. That's all.
Just one more thing. There's just one more thing. I was just looking at the comments on the side, and there's a comment about plagiarism in idea and concept, right? So this is something that I missed during the session, and that is called patent landscaping. So whenever we are writing a proposal or a project, right, it's also, rather than just going through the literature which is available in digital libraries, one may also refer to patent filings which are there. Okay, so Indian patents, international patents are already listed. So that is called patent landscaping, IP landscaping. So there, when you search with certain keywords, even if those articles are not published yet, right? Those ideas are not published yet, but have they been filed as a patent or not? That information you will get. So in that way, certain ideas which are not published yet but are in patent landscape already, that may be found. And plagiarism software will just detect language, but ideas and concepts, for that we will have to we'll have to do a very widespread literature survey to avoid such an overlap.
Okay, madam, for enlightening us your words and clarifying all the queries.
Thank you so much.
Okay, ma'am. It was an illuminating session that has made us all grateful beyond words. Our heartfelt thanks to you, madam, for taking time to deliver the talk. It was an honor to have you with us today. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank Dr. Yagneshwaran and you and Mr. Prashant, who had invited me earlier. Ms. Pranamya, who has been so supportive, helpful. She has been coordinating with me since the beginning. Everyone from the SJEC family, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. My sincere thanks to the press and media group of SJEC, particularly to Mr. Ragesh Raju for the logistic support. I thank whole SJEC family for being supportive always. A big thank you to all our wonderful participants for your active participation in the webinar. Thank you, one and all. The registration link for tomorrow's session will be sent to participants' email ID by today itself. And also the feedback link will be sent to your email as well as to Telegram group. I request everyone to log in to Telegram group as we are posting all the links to that group. We are ending the session. See you tomorrow morning with a new session at 10:30 a.m. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you. See you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Rajlakshmi, ma'am. Thank you.